Okay, so now that we've taken a look at the actual layout of the Changeling book, it's time that we look at the system itself. So, Changeling the Dreaming Second Edition operates off of the Storyteller system, which is what's used in most classic World of Darkness games to resolve combat, actions, and anything else that chance decides the outcome. So you're going to need to know a few key terms. First is a roll. This is what you might refer to as a test or a check in another game. A roll is when you roll the dice. It's that easy. Next, you're going to have your attributes. These are what you might think of as a stat in another system. Something like strength or dexterity. And then finally, we have abilities. Abilities are something like a skill. It's when you are trained to do something, or maybe something that you're naturally very good at. So, how do we resolve rolls of the dice in this system if we don't use a d20? Well, we use, as I said before, a big old bag of d10s. What you do is your storyteller, or GM, will figure out what you're trying to do and then decide an attribute and an ability that you need to roll. You add your ranks in both of those things, and then you take a number of d10s equivalent to the amount of ranks you have in both. Your storyteller then decides a difficulty that the test is going to be made at. So what you're doing is you roll all of your d10s, that's called your dice pool, all of them all at once, and however many meet or exceed the target number, that's called a success. Typically, you only need one success. The more successes you have, the better you pass. And if you fail entirely, you fail. But for every roll of a 1 on your dice, you remove a success. What happens if you roll more 1s than you have successes? That's called a botch, and that means that you fail in the worst way possible. So what I've just described to you is a regular action. But allow me to give you an example here. Let's say that you're trying to drive a car. Your storyteller might decide that you need to roll your dexterity attribute and your driving ability. Let's pretend that we have 2 ranks or dots in both. That means we have 4 total d10s to work with. We'll roll our 4 dice and see how many meet or exceed the target number. It's that easy. Next, we're going to take a look at multiple actions. And this is what happens when you need to do 2 or more things at once. Essentially, you take the smaller of your 2 dice pools. The storyteller assigns difficulty numbers. And then you split your smallest dice pool of the 2 however you want among the different things you're attempting to do. Meaning that it's very difficult to do more than one thing at once at the same time. The more things you try to do, the less dice you have to work with for each individual roll. It's pretty simple. Now let's take a look at an extended action. In an extended action, the storyteller decides that you need to make an amount of successes over a period of time. Sometimes time is very important, other times not so much. For instance, if you're trying to defuse a bomb, your storyteller might decide that you need to roll 5 successes over the course of 3 rounds of combat. Again, fairly simple. If at any point during this you botch one of your rolls, or roll more 1s than successes, you lose all the successes that you've gained up until that point. meaning that your task could now be impossible or very difficult. All right, next we'll take a look at a resisted action. A resisted action is what might be called a contest in another game. Essentially, you and someone else are rolling against one another. Maybe it's an arm wrestling match, or maybe one of you is trying to outrun the other, or outsmart. The storyteller is going to assign a difficulty to a specific roll. Both you and your opponent are going to roll your appropriate dice pools, and whoever scores the most successes wins. However, for each success the loser has rolled, the winner removes one of his own, just like as if he had rolled a 1. So, while you might succeed, how well you succeed depends on how poor the loser rolls. All right. The final type of action that we need to take a look at is the resisted and extended action. In this case, the storyteller will call for both parties to make a series of rolls and score a number of successes over a period of time. Remember that in the case of this, every success rolled by the loser of a given round removes a success of the winner, meaning that resisted and extended actions will take a long time if there's a high number of successes. The first person to reach the target number of successes wins the challenge. I suppose there is one more thing to take a look at, and that is teamwork actions. If you and, say, some of your friends in the troop or group of gamers want to achieve a goal together, the storyteller might decide that you can work together on this. This is called a teamwork action and teamwork rolls. All of you make rolls separately with your own dice pools, and all of your successes are added together to determine whether or not you succeeded at your task. Now, just like in other systems that utilize dice, you might be allowed to re-roll if you fail. However, the storyteller is encouraged and allowed to, but mostly encouraged, to add to the difficulty of the roll each time you retry it. Perhaps to represent you messing up some of the tools you're using, or maybe just as a gauge for how frustrated you are making the challenge harder. Storytellers, I encourage you to be stingy with the re-rolls, because if you're just going to allow someone to re-roll until they succeed anyway, what was the point of rolling to begin with? I know that this system can be very confusing to people coming over from D20 systems like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. So if you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll answer them as best I can. Thank you very much. And next time we'll take a look at some of the combat that can be had in Changeling: The Dreaming.